Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Passive Tree Podcast, a podcast dedicated to talking about life, Path of Exile 2, and everything in between. Today, on episode 11, we are joined by a fellow PoE creator and streamer. Give a warm welcome to Scrimps. Welcome on, and how the heck are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm always excited to get to talk about games with people. Always a good time. I was real happy when you invited me on because, just get excuse to get to chat with somebody, get to know more people, kind of build community up. And the game's been treating me pretty nice lately too, so that's been cool.
That's amazing to hear. And yeah, dude, totally. I 100% agree. That's kind of the reason why I started the podcast initially. I have a bunch of friends who are all gamers, but none of them play Path of Exile or basically any ARPG to begin with. So I'm like, oh, I need like a new group of like people to start like talking about games with because I just love these games so much. And that was like one of the main inspirations for starting the pod. So super happy to have you on, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come and chat, man.
Yeah, like I said, thanks for having me. It's real quick. I do want to comment on this because you said the thing about friends. Something I think PoE 2 is really good at. I know we're going to talk about some of this stuff later, but I tried to get all of my IRL friend group into playing PoE 1. They all gave it like a little bit of a shot. Nobody stuck around. PoE 2 on the first patch, every single one of them made it deep into maps. So I think that means something for sure.
We will definitely touch on that later. Let's put a pin in that because I think what you just said is definitely part of a greater discussion about sort of Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 that I'm so excited to talk to you about. But before we get into Path of Exile, I want to start with the early passive tree nodes, something that I like to do on this podcast to get to know you a little bit better, so the viewers in the audience get to know you a bit better. So let's jump into the first question here. So classic, give me your first foray into gaming. What were you playing as a kid? Was it PC? Was it console? Give me the story.
So the first games that I remember playing as a kid, we got a Sega Genesis when I was like, I don't know, maybe like 5 years old or something like that. And it came with Sonic 2, and I love that game. And it took me a really long time to beat it because 5-year-olds turns out not very good at much of anything. But I pretty much been hooked on games in some form or another ever since then. Like I remember going to, Blockbuster to get new games because we had enough money when I was a kid to like be able to get a console and like maybe a couple games, but I couldn't really own like a ton of games. So it was a lot of like, hey, my parents go to Blockbuster, they get movies, I grab a couple games or something like that. And one of the ones that really sticks out to me was Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which I'm part of a community that does randomizer play for that. And so when I mentioned like casting earlier, with like the mic, I do casting for tournaments for that sometimes. And that game when I was a kid, I remember, are you familiar with that game at all?
I've seen it. I'd never actually got into the Castlevania like franchise. I played like Super Metroid on like SNES back in the day, and I know that they're kind of similar in that genre, but to answer your question simply, no, I'm not super familiar with it.
Okay, so I'll try to be as brief with this as I can. Super Metroid is the Metroid half of Metroidvania, the whole genre, like Hollow Knight, stuff like that. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is specifically the game that the Vania half comes through. Generally refers to like sort of open, like map progression, but at the same time you're cut off from things by having to find like, oh, I need to go figure out where double jump is at or something like that. Well, in Symphony of the Night, there's the entire first castle. And if you get to the end of it without finding the Holy Glasses item, you can't see that Richter Belmont is possessed by some ghost thing. And you just, kind of beat Richter up and move on with your day. And that gives you the end of the game. But it's not the good ending. And I remember like finding out from some gaming magazine that there was an entire second castle. And I'm just like, Mom, I need to go back and rent that game again. Please, I need to play it again. And I've like ever since then, I've absolutely loved that game. But yeah, those are like kind of some of the earliest games. We had like a Genesis and then a PlayStation and then like a PlayStation 2. I remember really loving like Metal Gear Solid 2 when we got the PS2. I think that's one of the best games ever made. And then a big fan of Final Fantasy. I've got a bunch of Final Fantasy related stuff tattooed over here on my left arm. So I love a lot of games with like a good story, as much as like, maybe PoE, most people don't play it for the story. And I love PoE for what it is too. But I kind of like playing a good story game, maybe the same way other people might read a book, you know? It's just like a book where I get to be a part of the outcome. So,
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. We have very similar early gaming histories. My first ever console, I didn't actually own it, but I played on a Sega Genesis as my first console as well. My cousins had it, and we also had Sonic 2. One of like the pivotal games for me definitely was playing that and Sonic and Knuckles. I still listen to some of the music from that game, like Chemical Plant Zone, and like even like the first level, like, was it Emerald Hills or something like that? I can't remember
Emerald Hill
exactly.
Zone, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're so good. We were just talking about this last podcast with Local Hole. Shout out to the homie. But there's a game on there. I don't know if you ever played it called Shinobi 3. It was like a ninja game, side-scrolling game, and it's like it hands down has like my favorite video game soundtrack of all time. I'll send you it on Discord
Yes,
later
please
on
do.
because it's such a banger. I actually bought it on vinyl. But yes,
Nice.
so from what I'm gathering, it was console for quite a long time. When did you actually make the jump from console to PC gaming?
So I did play some PC games early as well, like early on ones that I remember. So PC games sort of started with like one of my grandparents was really into the Mech Warrior franchise, and like he had like, you know, the real nice joystick and all this stuff. And you know, whenever we would have like family gatherings, you know, Thanksgiving, stuff like that, you know, all the kids would get kind of, you know, hang out in the back room. Well, he would always set me up with the computer and set me up with his like his cool joystick and Mech Warrior and stuff. So that was like one of the first games I remember playing. But the first games that I really got hooked on were the first two Baldur's Gate games and Diablo, like original Diablo, which is a great kind of, you know, relation to the playing ARPGs now sort of thing. I remember Diablo was, I think, the first game I played online as well. Like, had friends down the street, and you know, you got to deal with like the dial-up internet connection, and hey, mom needs the phone, so you got to get off the game for a little bit. Oh, come on. But yeah, those were kind of my first PC games, and then I don't think I played it too heavy until Diablo 2. Like playing online Diablo 2 is when I started really playing on PC a lot more, and console kind of became. I play the story-based games that I like on here, but when I want to like really like hardcore game, it's happening on PC.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah, man. Diablo 2 was that like took over my life for like a good couple years. And then ever since then, I pretty much go back to that game at least once a year to get my fix through the story. It's been my favorite game of all time since I played it back in like the year like 2000 or whenever it came out, basically. It's incredible. All right, so cool. It sounds like you had pretty like balanced gaming experiences where it was like you had access to consoles throughout your childhood, you had access to computer games. Interesting that your grandpa was a part of that story. I haven't heard anyone talk about their grandparents being a sort of a gaming influence. Does he still play games? What's he up to these days?
He played games pretty well into his old age. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I mean,
Ah,
he
damn.
lived a pretty long and good life. So, and he had a pretty big impact on me, just like I don't know, just enjoying different kinds of games. Because, like you know, I played primarily story-based games before, and Mech Warrior, I think, was one of the first games I played where it was like, yeah, technically there's a story going on, but it was really all about, you know, this crazy. At the time, it seemed insane, but it was like, you know, this first-person view where you're inside the cockpit of this gigantic mech, and you can like customize your mech, and it was very much gameplay focused as opposed to being like, you know, almost like a book that I'm just playing along with. So yeah, definitely a pretty big impact there.
For sure, for sure. It sounds like you really look back on his influence fondly. So that's a beautiful thing to remember a person by, and it's a very unique thing as well. I don't think I know very many people online or in person who have had like a gaming influence from their grandparents. So that's super cool. And if you have kids and grandkids down the line, I'm sure you'll be an influence on them as well with gaming as well. So super cool. Thank you for sharing that. One other classic question I want to ask you is now that you're not playing games with your grandpa or playing, you know, Sega Genesis and stuff like that, how do you find balance with your gaming, content creation, and the rest of your responsibilities in life?
So last year I was still both working and playing games and streaming and stuff. And admittedly, one of the first things that kind of took a hit there was a bit of my social life with my friends. Like a lot of times, we would hang out in Discord and everybody would either play their own game or, on the occasions that everybody's gaming interests lined up, like when V Rising came out, everybody was pretty interested in V Rising, and so we all played together. But that was kind of what wound up taking the hit. Now, since I'm more making content full time, I mean, it actually has become kind of easier to balance things out in a sense because like I feel like I get all the gaming I want and then some. So I'm not feeling like super compelled to play games in like the time that I'm not trying to stream, for example. There are exceptions to this. I recently played Elden Ring for the first time and I've never played a Souls game, and I'll be honest, I was just completely sucked in. It was the only thing I could think about for 2 weeks. But the other thing that helps is that like getting some of those chores around the house done helps me feel better about the time that I spend playing games. And so like honestly, if I'm having a day where like let's say, maybe mental health is not the hottest it's ever been and I'm feeling kind of down, those are days where I'm like, I'm going to go clean a bunch of stuff because then I'll feel a lot better about myself, and then the house is better. It's kind of like a part of League Start is that like I take a couple days off before League Start happens so that I can make sure, I've gone shopping. I've made sure we've got, food ready to go. I've made sure that like the kitchen's in a decent state because I know I'm not going to clean any of it for the first 3 days. So like we need to make sure it's in a good place so that it can handle, a couple extra dishes being there. So yeah, I don't know. It's been a lot easier since like this has become like a full-time thing. But when I was trying to work and play games, it was very difficult to like find time for my friends mostly. Like I still find time for my partner, my girlfriend. That one's pretty easy. Like we live together. So always easy to find some time here and there. But the people you don't live with, the other people who they've got their own lives going on, it becomes a little more difficult to stay in touch with those people for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like you kind of have to add them to that list of like, this is going to sound bad, but list of chores that you have to interact with or do before a league start, just because you know that once something pops off like 3.26, you're not going to be able to really make that time. So yeah, it's totally a balancing act, 100%. And yeah, we all have to just kind of constantly like work on that, right? But it sounds like you got a pretty good thing going on. So let me ask you this. You said you were working and doing content creation, streaming, and all that kind of stuff. What was sort of the catalyst to help you sort of shift from doing both of those things to moving just solely focused on gaming, content creation, stuff like that?
I honestly, I sort of like backed into it a little bit. So what wound up happening, and it was unfortunate at the time. So I hurt my back at work. And it wasn't like a terrible injury, but it was enough to where I definitely wasn't going to be working for a few weeks, maybe upwards of a month. The doctor's note that I had was not from one of the lists, like an approved list of doctors from my employer. They wanted me to go back to a different doctor. I was very stubborn about it. I wound up losing my job. And at the time I was already streaming. This was right before 325 happened. So I said, you know what? Like, screw it. Let's just go in and try our best to make this thing work full time. And honestly, it was really rough that this, the league I chose to do this was 325, right? Because, we have a year-long league. But 326 has been going great so far. I felt really motivated to make more videos. Like I've put out 3 videos in the last week, and usually I was putting out like maybe 1 or 2 in a month. And I've been having a ton of fun with the process of making the content, like learning how to use the editing software better. I recently started making my own thumbnails, and like they're not, professional graphic design quality or anything, but it's cool to see myself get better at something and learn how to do something else. And like the first thumbnail was about as frustrating as the first Elden Ring boss I fought, which is to say, it took me a really long time, and maybe there was a lot of swearing on my end, but the second one yesterday, I made it, and then I realized that I didn't make it the right size, and I was able to remake it, and it took me a fraction of the time. And I was like, this isn't like the prettiest, most professional design, but it works. It does what I need it to do, and I did it. That's awesome. So yeah, like that's kind of how that happened, honestly. And I used to make music. So I've always wanted to do something creative, and this kind of scratches a lot of that same itch, because the thing I liked most about music was performing on stage, and streaming is just performance from your house, right? Like largely what you're doing is a performance entertainment kind of based job. And I've wanted to do that my entire life, basically. I also don't really like traveling as much as I used to. So that part of music sort of is not as appealing. Whereas like I've loved video games my whole life. We talked about that, just a few minutes ago. So I get to combine this performance thing that I love and these video games that I love. And I get to do that in a way that fits more with the person I am at this age, as opposed to the person I was, 5, 10 years ago.
That's very cool. It almost sounds like the sort of incident at your work was very much so like a happy accident, sort of, where like it wasn't like the ideal thing, obviously, but you kind of took the like and made the best of that situation, and it kind of like in some degree like pushed you into like a new like chapter of your life that seems to be more fitting to your interests and to your like personality as a person. So that's amazing, man. Congratulations. I think that's super cool. I'm a big proponent of like do your follow your like heart and pursue your passions. And clearly, we're both very passionate about gaming. We've been doing it for a long time, so I think that that's a beautiful thing. And I can definitely relate to that. I'm an artist. I do that as my full time job, but streaming and content creation, as you said, is a very creative field, just like being an artist is. And what you really get out of it is as much as you put in, and you really get to see that progress happen. Like quite quickly, honestly. Like it's just like what you said with the thumbnails. Like you're looking back at your experience from like however long ago it was that you made your first thumbnail to now where you're like getting snappier with whatever editing software you're using. Also, side note, if you ever need help, I'm a self-proclaimed Photoshop wizard. So please, if you're like, if you need help doing something, hit me up on Discord. I'd be happy to like show you something, teach you anything, anytime, bro.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the offer. And I'm certain I'll be taking you up on that probably sooner rather than later.
For sure. That's very cool. All right. So full-time content creation as of like the last year or so, multiple videos coming out for 3.26. So let me ask you one more question about the transition. So how did this transition kind of affect your life in any sort of way? Would you be able to sort of explain that to me? The transition between being having, your whatever it was, 9 to 5, we'll say, or job, and going to content creation.
For sure. I mean, the very obvious one is just like financial stress, right? When you're trying to grow from a smaller place, I mean, because essentially what you're doing is you're running your own business, right? And that was always the part of everything else I've done in my life that like I wasn't particularly good at. Playing music, like I felt comfortable on stage. I had enough people tell me that I was good at singing that I was like, okay, I guess I'm all right at this. Like, but dealing with like the business aspect of it, and especially like marketing myself, because like I'm not the kind of person where I have like some confidence in myself. Obviously, I don't have none, but I'm very, very incredibly critical of myself in everything all the time. I think that's why I get good at things, but it also makes it difficult when I'm supposed to be shouting from the rooftops, "Hey, I'm making something. Please check it out." And because like that's what you have to do. You have to let people know that you're making things, and you have to let people know that please check it out, right? And hope that it's something that's good enough to catch their attention. And like when I was making music, for example, I'm comparing myself to all of my favorite artists who are, many times bigger than I am at the time. And I'm not like most days comparing myself to people who are much bigger than me doesn't bother me. Like for example, with Path of Exile, an example that I can make that people would understand. I don't mind seeing how far off I am from how good Ben is at the game, because every time I see that gap get smaller, that's awesome, right? Am I ever going to catch up to that guy? There's like a 99% chance, probably not. Like that's just being realistic. But if the gap between me and Ben a year ago is like 80% and the gap between me and Ben now is like 60%, just, throwing out some random numbers, that's pretty encouraging, because that means like I'm getting quite a bit better at the game. And I've done the same thing with, everything else. Like I compare myself to people who are much better than me at things, but on a bad day, right? Like if you've got, mental health is not being so kind to you, that's not always the best thing. And so like, it's just been a little bit of a struggle figuring out like how do I market myself, because it's very easy. I think like if you look at what other people are doing on YouTube, for example, I see a lot of people doing like opinion pieces and like things that to me feel like they're not really saying much, but because they're a big personality, it still does well. And when I think about it, I'm like, well, why would I make content like that? Like, no one knows who I am. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say in that way, right? So I've tried to be very, very probably too particular about what I make content about. Like for, I mentioned that I just did my first build guide, and I was pretty scared of doing that for a while because I didn't want people to just rip the build apart. But the last few months especially has taught me that like I kind of know what I'm talking about here more than I thought I did, and I've been pretty helpful to a lot of people in my chat, and so I feel a little more comfortable just doing that. And my one rule, sorry, I don't know if I'm going too long-winded with this. My one rule with any content that I make like that, as long as it's something that I genuinely believe in, like market it. Like 100%. As long as you're not marketing garbage to people that you don't personally believe in, I don't think you're doing a bad thing. Like, so if you need to do some of that like clickbaity stuff with your thumbnail, things that make people want to click on your content, if you believe in what you're saying, that's okay. That's just marketing. So,
Wow,
that's definitely been.
that's an amazing answer, dude. And I will say this right now: never apologize to me for going on a long-winded answer. You are allowed to talk as long as you want. You are my guest. Please express your thoughts and your opinions as much as you see fit.
Thanks. It's
I do want to touch on one thing though, bro. I don't mean to interrupt you, but
No, you're good.
you did say the business aspect of something. This actually resonated with me quite a bit. We become so, I guess, focused on the progression of the skill or the art or the creative aspect of what we're doing, focusing on making better videos, making better content, making better art. And that's only half the battle, right? And the majority of the time, you know, you're getting better at these skills, but the business aspect of things is something that is overlooked by so many people. And I see this all the time in sort of my particular industry that I'm in, where I'm friends with quite a few amazing artists, but they don't know how to market themselves. They rely very much on the amazingness of their art and not so the amazingness of their selling themselves and stuff like that. And I think that directly is associated with very, very tough personal feedback that we give ourselves. I'm totally the same way as you, where when I look at stuff that I make, I am also subconsciously doing a lot of comparison. And I think that has a lot to do with like the nature of the world we live in today, where you're constantly like looking at content, you're looking at things and thinking about that in a way where like, how does this compare to mine? And it's something that it's so hard to separate from. But it's something that I've been trying to work on as well. Like I did this whole year without like Instagram on my phone up to like a very recent point because I was doing that. I was looking at what I would post. I would post something that I was super excited on, that I believed in, and then I would go and see one of my idols, who is, as you said, the Bens of the world in the mural game, and be like, shit, I don't know. But the gap is closing, and that's something that you can't see happening on a day-to-day basis. But it's like you said, if you look back on a year, it's like watching a plant grow. You can, every day if you stare at a plant, you're not going to see it grow, but over a year's time, it's going to be huge, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. No, dude, I loved that answer that we got from that question, man. That was so very good. And yeah, it's tough to really like just be stoked on your own stuff. And because now you don't want to come off as like, I don't know, self-centered or egotistical and stuff like that, always trying to be humble with your own stuff. But at the same time, you got to do it. You got to hype yourself up, you know?
Yeah, I've always been really afraid of being one of those people who's like too drunk on their own sauce. Um, and so like honestly, this is something like I've talked with, my therapist about too. Just like it's like at some point you need a little bit of that. Like if it's something that you're afraid of too, you're probably almost never going to step way past the line of the amount of that that's okay, right? And like that line's going to be different for everybody too, but like if it's something that you're constantly aware of, like you're already doing the thing to keep yourself from going over the edge, right? It's like I like this is like a bit bigger of a response, but I think it kind of fits with it. I remember like I was talking, just as like long time ago, talking to a friend, and like, like I feel like most people have probably at some point like wondered like, am I a good person or not? And I was just like, oh man, I think I'm like the worst, blah blah blah, like super down on myself. And he's like, dude, he's like, just the fact that you think about whether you're the worst already makes you kind of decent. And I think that fits with this too. Like just the fact that you're thinking about like, am I being too gung-ho about my own stuff is probably going to keep you from actually being too gung-ho about your own stuff. So just try your best to make something that you're proud of, that you believe in, and then put it out there. Let people know it's there. And if it's good, if it's as good as you think it is, like, they're going to come to it.
Absolutely. And that sort of baseline of good will always sort of change as you get better with what you're doing, right? Like, I was talking about this with local hall on our previous episode. Every time you start doing something, you're obviously going to be terrible at it. But the baseline for what you think is good is so low that when you put that first video out there, you think it's great because you're like, I'm happy with this. This is awesome. This is going up on the YouTube page. You know what I mean? And then you look back on your content from like a year ago and you're like, I've come so far. My thumbnails were out of whack, my titles were out of whack, my editing was out of whack, but that's only stuff that we become aware of as we grow and as we get better at these things that we're doing. So, yeah, man, I hear you for sure on that.
It's great that you mentioned Locahall there too, because Locahall and another streamer, Arrow, were kind of the two PoE people that pushed me into giving streaming a shot in the first place. This was like middle of Affliction League, and Locahall specifically, when I was like talking about like, oh, I don't know if I could ever do this stuff, he said, go find any content creator that you really like, that you think makes really good stuff, pull up all of their videos and go look at their first uploads, and you'll see nobody started off good at this. And like him saying that has honestly really stuck with me. So big shout outs to Alcohol. He's pretty cool.
He's very cool. He said that on the pod last week, and it was just a wonderful piece of advice and something that I never really thought to actually go and do. So I've actually been kind of on like a little bit of like a weird like clicking the oldest video tab on like some of my favorite creators since that, and looking at stuff. Like I really like this content creator Nakey Jakey. He's one of my favorites on YouTube. I don't know if you've ever seen his stuff before, but he makes awesome gaming content, and he's come so far in the 10 years that he's that he's been doing it. But you see him on his channel, every single video he puts out gets like 1 million views. But he had like a video maybe a couple months after like he just started, and it was like, yay, I got to 70 subscribers, guys. And it was like the cutest like video that he put out there being like, I'm so excited, I got 70 subs on my new YouTube channel. You know what I mean? It's like the homie's got 2 million now. It's like it's crazy. Like it's crazy. All
That's
right,
awesome.
guys. So let's transfer over into gaming. Yes, this is a gaming podcast, but the life portion of it super important. I love talking about all this stuff with all the different guests. So you mentioned, Scrimps, that D1 was your first ARPG. Let me ask you this: how did you hear about Path of Exile?
So Path of Exile, I had one of my friends that I used to play Diablo 2 with a decent amount. I had like COVID hit and I started playing Diablo 2, like another fresh run, and I was trying to get him to play it with me, and he goes, "No, you should play Path of Exile with me." And I was like, "Well, can you like let me know?" He's like, "You know how like you play Diablo 2 and like a week later your character's level 90 and you're kind of bored because there's nothing to do? That will never happen in Path of Exile." And I was like, "All right, I'm sold." Um, he gave me 2 guides to start with. He gave me Shack Central's Cold Dot Guide. This is in 3.16 Scourge. So he gave me Shack Central's Cold Dot Guide. He basically, the way that I kind of do starting off in these games is I look at like the base classes. I just pick the ones that sound the coolest, and then we try to find like a decent guide for something there so that like I'm not just like winging it blind, right? And winging it blind in PoE is so much harder than most other games. Like you could do that in Diablo and you would find some decent success. Like you'd have to be a very rare breed of person to wing it with Path of Exile with no experience and, get to maps or something even. So I told him, I was like, the Witch sounds cool. The Shadow sounds cool. I like both of those the most. Those are still my favorites, but Duelist is pretty sick too. He gave me Shack Central's Cold Dot. He gave me Seismic Trap, Saboteur, and a month later I was in M3 farming in Scourge. So like I was pretty much immediately obsessed with the game, and I started like learning how to craft as early as I could. But yeah, honestly, like a big part of why I think I dove so hard into it was just, COVID had happened, right? And so it was like I already had a ton of time to just sit at home and play games, and I was really loving the game anyway. So I had all of this free time to just throw myself at like watching as much content as I could and checking out what streamers were doing and like reading different documents and watching videos and all that stuff. And like I already like playing games like that. Like I like to just like rip a game apart and learn everything about it. And now I've gotten to the point with PoE where I feel like I have enough experience that I can wing stuff myself and figure out how it works. Like, oh, I wanna try doing this thing with this character. Like, oh, like let's put together a new farm. I don't need to go check out XMF streamers spreadsheet to know like what's a good farm. Like I can put one together myself. And I'm not saying anything bad about anybody else for checking things because it's a very complex game. And like I, especially if you've got limited time and you've got goals in the game, like you should go and make sure that what you're doing is at least a somewhat known commodity because it feels bad to spend the limited time that you have on something and not reach your goals, right? So I didn't want that to come across in any way that's like looking down on anybody else for checking things out because you absolutely should do that. I mean, I still do check out other people's content just to see what other people are doing, but now I feel a little more comfortable with kind of doing my own thing and maybe sharing what I'm doing with other people.
Totally. And boy, COVID was a time for gaming. I played an ungodly amount of a little game called Rust when I got into, or when I
Mm.
was in my apartment for all day, every day during COVID. And let me tell you, Path of Exile and Rust are both very similar in a sense because you can spend a ton of time in both of those games. Rust, as I'm assuming you're aware of, has a wipe cycle of every week, basically on a server. So all your progress gets redone, and then you're just back on the server the next week. And with Path of Exile, they were doing I think back then it was still like the 3-month cycle for content. So there was fresh content happening so frequently in both games that they were like the perfect games to play during lockdown. So you got into Path of Exile pretty not recently, but not super early on in its development cycle. Were you aware of Path of Exile when it was in beta, when it was kind of sort of making headlines back in like 2013, or were you sort of in the dark on the game back then?
I didn't really know too much about it. The same friend that I mentioned had been trying to like get me to play it periodically with him. But prior to COVID, I was very into rhythm games. Specifically, I always feel like this is like the weirdest nerd flex, but I was one of the top 10 DDR players in the United States and one of the top 20 DDR players in the entire world prior to COVID happening. And COVID just meant I could no longer go to the arcade and play Dance Dance Revolution for 4 to 8 hours. So I just kind of stopped playing. Like this thing behind me is actually it's a Pump It Up cabinet, which is like the 5-panel Korean dance game. So I still love playing those games. I just don't have like the same competitive drive to play constantly that I used to have. It's more like, oh, if I want to get like a nice little workout in, I'll turn the machine on and play for an hour or something. Um, but I never really made time for anything else before that because my balance was pretty much work, social life, and every shred of free time that I wasn't spending with like my girlfriend or my friends was going to the arcade to play DDR. And like at the time I was working like 4 jobs prior to COVID. I had like 2 proper jobs and then I did like some like freelance IT work, like helping a friend out. Like he'd be like, "Hey, I need an extra pair of hands that knows what they're doing to set up this stuff in an office." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, cool." And then I had another friend who ran like an events business with video games and like other, like AV technology and stuff like that. And so like I had 2 jobs where I was like a proper employee and 2 things where I was doing sort of contracted work. And then I was still playing DDR, 20 hours a week or something like that. And so I just did I never played like anything on my console. I never played anything else on my PC. It was just DDR all the time.
That is crazy.
Um
So you said top 10 in the US or North America and top 20 in the world. How do you get to that point? Is there like competitions that you go to like get like beat other people? Just tell me a little bit more about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. So there's the actual ranking that I'm citing. So every year Konami would run a tournament called it was like KAC, the Konami Arcade Championship, and it was more the actual tournament once you got there was more of like an expo kind of because it was part of like a larger event in Japan. I believe it's called like JPO, it's like JAEPO, and it's like more of like for businesses to show off their new things for investors and things like that. But one of the things Konami did to show off their music games was they had this big tournament. And once you got to the tournament, like we all kind of, everybody who's in the competitive scene kind of agreed that the rules were not great competitive integrity wise, but the qualifying period was hyper competitive because Konami would put out this list of songs and then you had just as many times as you wanted to play those songs over the course of the qualifying period, which would be a couple months, to just try to get the best score you possibly could cumulatively across all the songs. And so the last one of those that I qualified for, I was like 8th in the US and like 19th worldwide or something like that. And yeah, I don't know. There were a lot of like smaller tournaments. Like it was really kind of like grassroots driven community outside of that. Like, people who were inclined to organize would get together with their local arcades and be like, hey, we'll give you this portion of the entry fees to be able to use this machine and like the party room for the entire day. And I remember like, all of the like early tournaments were pretty small at like these smaller sort of arcades. And now, one of the last big tournaments I went to is called The Big Deal. This was in Grapevine, Texas. And there were like 160 something entrants, and that's just in the one DDR tournament. There's also Pump It Up tournament and Sound Voltex and all these other rhythm games that most people probably haven't heard of. But it's been great. And then like one of the other big tournaments that happens now is tied in with, if you're familiar with CEO, it's a fighting game tournament that gets run down it was Orlando and then it was Daytona. And I think they've moved back to Orlando. But it's a huge fighting game tournament. And one of the people that I know from the dance game community, one of my friends, he knows Alex Jubaili, right? Like Alex Jubaili used to play DDR as well, not like as seriously, but like they knew each other from arcades. So he got in contact with him and was like, hey, would you ever be interested in having our event as like a side event for your event? And Jubaili was like, yeah, absolutely. So basically this event called DDR Storm got attached to CEO, and CEO is selling some more badges because of that. We get to be attached to a bigger event. And one of the things that's really cool about that event too, is like just how much crossover interest there was between fighting game players and dance game players. Because at their core, both games are really just a series of very complex button inputs. One of them is about reading your opponent. The other one's about reading what's on the screen. But like, a lot of us rhythm game players would have this huge respect for these good fighting game players, and then like vice versa. Like I would talk to these guys and they'd be like, dude, I don't know how you do that. I'm like, I don't know how you do that. And it was just really fun. And like, I must have made so many friends where like, I don't know their name. I'll never see them again, but we had a great time that weekend.
That's rad. And I feel like another connection that fighting games and dance games or rhythm games, they have a very deep connection to the arcade. Like, you go to an arcade, you see that glorious DDR machine, front and center, but there's also all these other fighting games, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and like those are the things that people are jamming on a lot in those arcades. So I feel like they're kind of like, the the Arnold Schwarzenegger like handshake, the great handshake meme where it's like fighting games and dance games are like, shaking hands like that. Cause they were both getting jammed out in arcades since like way back in the day. You know what I mean? So that's super cool. I love hearing that story. Thank you for sharing that. One more question about this whole, dance game kind of arc that we're talking about. So after COVID ended, did you end up going back into the arcades after and sort of picking up where you sort of left off? Or was that sort of just a chapter in your life that was sort of over and done with?
I mean, it's tough, right? Because now I have a machine behind me where I can play. And like, what's funny to me is like, I started to like Pump It Up more than DDR. So without getting too in depth on these differences, DDR is more about timing, like really tight timing windows. And Pump It Up is more about like difficult things to accomplish physically. And the timing windows are considerably looser. I played DDR more, even though I liked Pump It Up more, because I was world class at DDR, and for Pump It Up, I was good for the average rhythm gamer, but I was getting bounced out first or second round in a tournament in that. Whereas like in DDR, like I'm gonna be close to making Final Four just about every time. So like it was one of those things where like I just did the thing I was good at because it was easier to continue to do that. And now it's like I have the game that I like more right behind me, and my nearest arcade with a DDR machine is like an hour drive. So given that like I already don't like leaving my house as much, what am I going to do? I'm going to go throw on a pair of shorts and come down here and play, or I'm going to go drive an hour one way, and then I'm out of shape now, so I'm going to be tired after like 45 minutes of playing, and then I'm going to, I don't know what, drive an hour home. So no, I really haven't been back too much, but I've been kind of wanting to. I used to also make content for that game in the sense of like there is a third game in the groove, which is like essentially just for it's like DDR almost exactly. It's 4 panels, it's timing based, but we made custom content for it. And so that's making like the steps to a song yourself. And there's a lot of like learning how to like do minor audio editing with like cutting things and making sure they stay on sync. And you can like really kind of represent the soul of the song. Like, oh, like the singer hits a particularly high pitch. Well, maybe you have the player like turn sideways real quick or something like that. Or like, maybe in a metal song with some crazy double bass, you have like steps following the double bass, and every time there's a big crash hit, you make the player hit 2 arrows with 1 foot, stuff like that. I have really been itching to make some of that content again. I used to make tons of it, and I don't think I'll ever get back to making as much as I did. But I have people from that community ask me all the time, like, "Yo, when are you gonna make some new step charts?" And like, I've had a lot of cool music shared with me with people on my stream, and I'm like, I think I want to make something. Like even if it's just a little 5-10 songs, put something together. Like it's just fun. It's just fun to make things, And like I feel like you definitely can relate to that, with your main career, like art in all of its forms, like whatever one you take, it's just fun to make things. It really is.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to lie, I need to see videos of you like playing these games now because I have such a high respect for that. I played DDR quite a bit when I was a kid, never really in the arcade because I grew up in a small town without an arcade. But, we had a PS2 with the game and a bunch of those like cloth like mats basically that you plug into the PS2, and they would always shuffle around when you're playing them and stuff like that. But it was amazing. It was so fun. Also a really great workout, like playing for like an hour and you're like sweating buckets and like laughing your head off. And I could never do more than like maybe a couple songs on like hard. Like I think that was like as far as I got when I was like in elementary school or high school and stuff like that. So like it's hard for me to imagine getting to the point where you got, where it's like you got so good that you were doing like the craziest stuff, getting ranked so high. So yeah, that's super cool, man. And what a wonderful like little story that I didn't know about that we got to share today.
I can I'll send you a video once we're done chatting here. I have a couple up on like my old like kind of personal YouTube channel. So
Yes, please. That sounds awesome. I don't usually like interject like clips or anything into the podcast, but this might be the first time where I gotta follow this up with a clip. So that would be super cool. So moving back over to Path of Exile. So we talked about sort of you getting into it during COVID. It was sort of a, helping you pass the time and get through that sort of tough time in a lot of people's lives. We were stuck inside for a while. Now that 3.26 is out, um, let's talk about it. So Path of Exile 2 came out in December. We're all familiar with the fact that the development of Path of Exile 2 not sort of, it hindered the development of Path of Exile for a bit. What were your thoughts sort of in that moment? Being someone who enjoyed Path of Exile so much, how did you find that sort of time frame, basically, where Path of Exile 2 was getting all the love and Path of Exile wasn't? Were you excited to play Path of Exile 2 then, or were you like, damn, like I'm really just missing out on like the next PoE 2 or PoE league that should be coming out soon?
oh, I was very excited about PoE 2 when it came out. And if I'm being honest, I am still very excited about PoE 2 from a long-term standpoint because there are quite a few things about that game that I think it does much better than PoE 1. Um, but I also still feel like in its current state, it's just a little bit undercooked for me. Like I played a lot on the first patch and I had a blast, but like for example, I in every single league for PoE 1 that I've played outside of my first, I've taken a character, at least one character to level 100. I can't imagine taking a single character to 100 in PoE 2 right now, and it's not because there's not enough to do. There isn't really of that either, but the experience curve in that game is so brutal. It's like level 96 feels like level 99 in PoE 1, and I feel like it's too harsh. And they didn't even, no one even pointed at the fact that maybe that was a problem when it came to the Dawn of the Hunt patch. And so I was just like, there's just too many things about this game that are frustrating for me in its current state. And instead of, sitting here and playing it and letting myself get frustrated, I'm just going to go enjoy a bunch of these other games that I've wanted to play for a while. And when PoE 1, when Freesia came out, I played Freesia a lot. Freesia gave me what's maybe my favorite build of all time in Blade Vortex Bog Shaman. That build was insane and super fun to put together. I played in the most recent BPL. That was my first time being a part of that. For people who aren't familiar, that's Badger Private League. It's basically like a 3-day team-based event where they sort people into these giant teams and everybody works towards the common goal of getting the most points. And I had a blast with that. And then I started, once 326 got announced, I started like trying to practice the campaign again and get faster. And it was like, okay, let's see if we can get down to like 4 hours on a fresh start, because I've never really done any better than 5 hours at my very best. And so I was like, I'll spend some time practicing this and try to just really get it down. And I didn't feel bad about the fact that PoE 2 is taking time from PoE 1, in the sense that like, I want to see both games do well. I want to see PoE 2 be amazing, because PoE 2 has, I would argue, the single best boss fight in any ARPG. I think Zeshtula is the best designed endgame boss in any ARPG. I think it's difficult enough, but it's also fair. The things are like plainly telegraphed, but still can be sometimes very hard to dodge. He's thematically cool. He had good rewards. At least he had the pair of gloves, right? And like the jewel that he dropped sometimes, like there were just so many things about that fight that were amazing. And then like, I think, as like a different example, the God, what's that guy? The Arbiter of Ash. I think that fight's a little bit unfair the way it's currently designed, but I don't think it's too far off of being great. I think it's like close to being great, but also not very good in its current state, if that makes sense. And then like the campaign bosses, like I think Geonor is one of the coolest bosses ever in an ARPG. It's just like perfectly executed fight thematically. And when I was playing through the campaign the first time, I left the music on. Normally I listen to my own music, but I was like, this is my first time playing. I want to experience the music. And like, oh my God, that fight, the music was perfect. And he's got this like cool epic poem thing that he's like saying to you. And that's the telegraph for the attacks. And like, there's a lot of things about that game that are cool, but like, crafting is not very good right now. And crafting is one of my favorite things about PoE 1, and experience curve doesn't feel very good. So I don't know, like at some point that game's going to be amazing and I'm going to really enjoy it. And until I see a patch where I look at it and I'm like, this is it, I'm okay with not playing it. And I hope that they continue to develop, I hope they continue to put time into PoE 2, and I hope other people give it another shot. Like, and if it doesn't seem like it's the game for you right now, that's totally okay. No one's making you like it. And I hope that they keep developing PoE 1 so that the people who don't like PoE 2 still have the thing that they love to play. I understand why other people were upset, but like, things happen and you can't blame them for putting a lot of time into their new project, because people want to create something new, and also they're a company and companies need to make money. As much as it sucks to think about, like they do need to think about that.
Absolutely. I think you have a very nuanced take. It came as no surprise to me that there would be some, a bit of fumbling of the bag, especially when a company like GGG, who is relatively small, they're not as small as they once were, of course, but any company like that who is essentially bringing on a second product, a second game, there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be issues. There's going to be a rebalancing of, talent and how they're going to sort of figure that out. And I think they really just did the best they could. I really do, feel for the people who are in the PoE 1 community, because, it's no secret. Everyone was very used to this specific cycle of content, whether it was the 3-month cycle for a really long time, moving over to the 4-month cycle. And the game is addictive. Like it gets sort of your fix, right? Like you come back every month, every 4 months, every 3 months, and you get your fix for a few weeks, a month or whatever. And that impact had a lot of impacted a lot of people's lives, right? Like people were just like, excited. They would prepare 3 days in advance, making sure that they do all the stuff they need to do, because when the patch drops or the expansion drops, they're logging in and they're not logging out for a couple days at least. So I can totally understand where a lot of the PoE 1 community came from with that. At the same time, PoE 2, it's just let's just say this. It's a different game for a lot of different reasons, and I will follow up with one thing that you said. So I just went back and played PoE one for the very first time ever. I've never played PoE one before. I've only played
Damn,
PoE
really?
two. Yes, and so I have about 1,000 hours in PoE two. God, the XP curve. I'm level 96 right now in hardcore solo self found, and I don't see myself pushing further than that. I mean, there's a way you can juice XP with towers and specific waystones and stuff like that, and investing heavily into XP shrines and stuff. But like, aside if you're not doing that, the grind is very real, very very real. But yeah, so I went back and played PoE one for the first time ever. 3.26 was my first ever expansion. I did it blind. I never watched a single tutorial or build guide. And I made it to maps. I made it to level 80 in about like 30 hours or so. It's actually the topic of my next video, which comes out tomorrow, guys. Self plug. Um, but playing the game for the first time ever really made me realize and appreciate the decision making that went into Path of Exile 2. And there's just so many differences that I didn't really understand, where a lot of people were talking about, certain things, crafting being one of them, the end game experience being one of them, that are incredible in Path of Exile 1, that are certainly leaving a void for people in Path of Exile 2 right now. But it made me super optimistic for PoE 2. Like, seeing the shit that they have in PoE 1, I was like, man, if even like a tenth of this stuff makes it in to PoE 1 and has the polish and like the, refinement that PoE 2 has, like, this game is going to be unbelievable when it's done. And I personally think it's still really, really, really good now. But there is a lot of cool stuff in PoE 1 that, like, I really hope to see in PoE 2 or PoE 2 as well.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that just kind of like almost like blew my mind a little bit about how negative some people's reception was like, guys, this is still the same dev that cooked your favorite game and has been cooking your favorite game for over a decade. And like, I feel like even if you're frustrated with them, they've at least earned like the tiniest bit of faith that this new thing that they're going to make is going to be incredible eventually. Like, it's not like PoE 1 was a fluke, right? Like, they were consistently making it better over a very long period of time. And if you go back and you look at like PoE 1, like early PoE 1 videos, like from way before either of us were playing, you see people like with like 3 attacks per second doing dox farming, and that was insane at the time, right? Like, I 100% think it's going to get there. And it like I said, for me, it's literally, I think it's already pretty good. I played a lot of the first patch. I took one character to level 98. That was like a Chiula monk. As Chunk is better than people think it is, by the way. Just let me sneak that one in there real quick. But my other character that I played was one of my favorite characters I've played in anything. Was I did the Demon Witch Infernalist with like the permanent demon form essentially. And I did mine. Mine was one of the things I like to do in general with builds. I like to take something that's sort of meta and figure out how do I put like my own little bit of a twist on it. And so for this, I was like, what if I take this demon form thing people are doing, and I take this spark thing people are doing, and I smack it together into one build, and we throw an original sin on it because it's funny. And it was pretty good. Like, I was clearing, the highest tier of these Uber bosses. I was, clearing high tier maps without problems. Like, every once in a while, you get clapped, but like, mistakes happen, things happen. And then they just gutted it. They removed it. It's gone. It's deleted. I can't log in, even though that character still exists. I can't play that character because it doesn't function the same way, not even close. And it was just like stuff like that, and the fact that like I don't understand. I still don't understand why they changed Hex Blast the way they did. Like, if the skill isn't meant to work with blasphemy, then it just doesn't seem like it makes sense to use. And they did it in the same patch that they're like, okay, you have to wait for your curse to be 50% expired. Also, we increased the amount of time that it takes for curse to expire. I was like, guys, just tell people you don't want them to play Hex Blast. Like, make it easier, because that's what this says. And then, like, I finally scrolling through the notes, I got to where they nerfed the amount of life Candlemass gives, and I think that was the last piece of hay where I was just like, I'm not coming back to this game. Like, we're nerfing life? Are you kidding me? We already can't get enough life, and you're taking some of it away. Like, as much as like, I got a lot of faith in GGG as a company and like their ability to like balance, but even the smartest and best people do things that are just pretty stupid. And like when you're balancing a game that's that complex, sometimes you're going to do things that like don't make any sense. And I'm not going to pretend that like I've ever been a game dev. So like maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but like I've played a lot of games and I'm the kind of person, like I said, where I rip everything apart. So at the very least, maybe I don't know what the solution is, but I can tell you it's not nerfing life. I can tell you that for a fact.
Dude, I know. I watched that video that you made as sort of like a refresher for part of this podcast. And I got to that reaction that you had where they were nerfing the 3% from 8% to 5%. And dude, I had the same reaction when I read through the Dawn of the Hunt patch notes. I was like, boys, like, I'm not a game dev, but that seems a bit egregious. Like, come on, guys, let us keep that 3%. Like, maybe bump it up to 10%. That'd be nice. Like, come on, guys. So I don't know. It was weird. But you know what's crazy is that, I'm not saying that you missed out on Dawn of the Hunt. You honestly probably dodged a bit of a car wreck. As I'm sure you're aware, the beginning of Dawn of the Hunt was very poorly received by the community. But since then, it's gotten a heck of a lot better. Like, it feels like a completely different like patch at this point. It's incredibly good now. So I'm still having a lot of fun playing it even to this day. I'm actually starting a Chalua Monk on hardcore solo cell phone right now. I'm gonna do like a bow build. I think that's gonna be like my next like weird off meta character.
Nice.
But yeah, it's like, oh, dude, I can totally get it. When I watched your video, refreshing it, I actually watched it when Dawn of the Hunt like came out. I'm actually friends with Everseen, who's I know a homie of yours as well.
Oh,
Shout out to the homie. He was actually the first guest on this podcast. Super cool guy. Love that guy. And I was talking to him about like, oh damn, like Scrimp, like your friend Scrimps just made this video about why he's skipping like Dawn of the Hunt. And I thought it would be like a super cool conversation to have. So I'm glad that we're getting to have this conversation now, is what I'm saying, even though it's a couple months later than when Dawn of the Hunt launched. But yeah, man, it's started off rough, but it got a lot better for sure. And hopefully with 0.3, it just continually gets better.
I got a lot of faith that that'll be the case for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about PoE 1 for a bit. So going into the game completely blind, I had a lot of anxiety because there's this aura about Path of Exile 1 where, especially like before a league or like an expansion happens, everyone's talking about these starter guides, these starter builds, and whose starter build is better. There's a little bit of drama going on in the community about like who had the better starter builds and people arguing over POB and all this stuff. And I just turned a blind eye to all that shit, man, and said I'm going in completely on my own, the same way that I played PoE 2, where I went in, didn't look up anything because there wasn't anything to look up because the game just came out. But what I really love about ARPGs is the magic of discovery. And I think that PoE 2 was just filled with these beautiful moments of discovery, whether it was discovering these cool boss fights, discovering this amazing music, visual effects, or cool synergies between skills. And PoE 1 delivered on that front as well. That was the biggest takeaway I had from my experience, was like the magic of discovery is still very much there, but a lot of people get sort of turned off by, I guess, the layer upon layer. It's like a giant onion, a massive onion of systems and mechanics, right? So I wanted to ask you, if we were talking right now and I was telling you, yo, Scrimps, I'm going into PoE 1 blind, but I'm only going to listen to like one piece of advice from you, what would you give to me as a brand new PoE player, basically to help me on my journey? What's like one thing you would say to a new player?
I think you need to give me 1 second. My headset's threatening to die on me, so I need to plug it in.
No problem.
There we go. Okay. Honestly, if you try to look at the mountain of content and skills and everything that's available, it's going to be overwhelming for everyone. If you're like, it doesn't matter if you're Faker or like John Dad with 40 kids, like it's going to be overwhelming for every single person if they've never played it. So the thing to do is just be okay with that. And as a particular piece of content grabs your attention, go learn everything about it. Like when I started off, like I said, I was handed 2 build guides, but other than that, I wasn't told anything. I was basically just handed a couple guides so that like I would have, a decent character to start with, and I led out into the wild to figure out what this game was about. And every time I wound up liking a piece of content, I went and I looked up stuff about it. I would start off by just reading maybe like wiki entries on it, like, oh, like what's this breach thing doing? This is pretty cool. Like in Scourge, it was awesome too, because you could like the Scourge mechanic, you would like enter a second realm And then when you snapped back out of it, it would snap you back to your original position. And so real quick, I realized this thing with breach where I'm like, oh, I can like open the breach and then go into the scourge realm and kill all the monsters and run one way, and then snap back to the middle of the breach and go kill all the monsters on the other side of it and save myself some movement. I was like, this is fun. This is awesome. And then it's like, okay, this betrayal mechanic seems cool, but it's like kind of difficult. Let's figure out what's going on with that. And then like the first time I wanted to go buy an expensive item, like I needed tailwind cooldown boots for this build I wanted to make. And I was like, okay, well, let's see. Oh, that's really expensive. I wonder how you make those. Because like those don't just drop like that. So like that was the first time I looked up a crafting video. Coincidentally, we mentioned him earlier. It was a local haul video, and I learned how to make double elevated tailwind boots. And it was like, okay, like that was my big crafting project for the end of the league. Was something that is like, it's not like basic for any player, but for like a high end player, that's like a relatively kind of bread and butter craft. But like for me, it was like, this is my big end game project, and like it was fun, and I didn't feel bad about I don't look back on it and go like, oh, you bozo, you didn't know how to do that. It was like, dude, that was the first step towards where now I'm pretty good at crafting. And like local was in his stream a few days ago, and he commented on the fact that it kind of come full circle because he asked me for some crafting advice now. And like when I started out, I was watching his videos. So yeah, like it's gonna be overwhelming. Just like be okay with that, and don't worry about the fact that you don't know about something. If it doesn't grab your attention or like tickle your fancy at the beginning, who cares? You don't need to interact with it. At least not if you're in trade, right? Like if you're in SSF, maybe you'll be forced to interact with it at some point. And like you just keep doing that, and every time you get bored of one mechanic, another one will grab your attention, and some number of hours later, you're going to be like, oh, I actually kind of know what I'm doing.
So you're saying essentially one step at a time, be okay with the overwhelm and just focus on the things that are exciting or fun to you as you're playing through the game, basically. I think that's a really good piece of advice. As I played through, I played on SSF because I do think that that is like the truest, like, not, I don't want to sound like a purist or elitist, but I feel like that's like the way, my favorite way to experience an ARPG is essentially not to trade with other players. I think that it kind of forces you to have to interact with a lot of different systems. Whereas with Trade League, as you said, you can kind of like play around certain things, or if you need certain currencies, I guess you could trade for them and stuff like that. But for me, it was very much so, and we can kind of get into a conversation sort of about the differences between PoE 1 and PoE 2 as we sort of been talking about them already. But for me, the campaign, which is very much so the way that a new player is going to interact with the game, they're going to play through the campaign. It felt so vastly different from my PoE 2 experience, where the PoE 2 experience on one hand felt like this beautiful cinematic and pretty narrative like story that I was playing through and experiencing, and it was backed up by these amazing boss fights and these like kind of milestones that I was playing through. In PoE 1, for me, it felt like the game was presenting all of these different mechanics, i.e., like league mechanics that have been added over like 10 years of development. And that sort of overrode the campaign experience, and it made the campaign feel like sort of just this giant tutorial. It was like from the moment I spawned in on the beach to when I killed Katava, every single act there was something new, some sort of league mechanic, or and a few different zones and a couple different acts and something new. And it did very much become overwhelming to the point where I didn't know if I should be doing these or if I should just skip them until maps, and it was almost like the game being like, these are all the things that you can do in this game when you get to maps. So it was like, I just want to play through the campaign. And is this part of the campaign? Do I have to do it? And so that was sort of one of my biggest takeaways from my experience, was like the campaign felt like a filter that a lot of new players probably aren't going to make it through because there is just so much stuff going on. What is your thoughts on that?
I mean, like I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with it being sort of a filter, and also like a lot of even like people who love PoE 1 view the campaign as sort of like eating your vegetables, or like, I mean, vegetables are pretty good, but like, like just like phrasing wise, or like doing chores. Like it's like this suffering that they have to go through to get to the main game. I don't personally feel like that. I used to. The main thing that's changed it for me as like an experienced player is I try to get better at it. Like I focus on like how can I go faster? How can I have like a more efficient run, and competing with myself to see like how much better at it I can get. So that's kind of helped out with that. But the PoE 2 campaign, like I don't think there's any mincing words with this. It's just a much better gameplay experience, I think. And like, are there some imbalances with it? Yeah, for sure. Like there's certain parts of it that are, weirdly difficult for reasons that don't feel like they're fun. But at the same time, like I 100% agree with what you said about it being sort of like a cinematic experience. Like when I don't know how many times I've run the PoE 1 campaign. I still don't entirely know what's going on with most of those characters. Like, who is Malachi? Why do we not like him? Why does he not like us? Who knows? I sort of know who Innocence is, I think, I guess, him and, but I still don't know to this day really anything about Piety or why she's this problem for us for the first 4 acts of the game. But like when I play PoE 2, like I know why we have beef with Geonor. Like Geonor tried to execute us at the start of the game and kind of started this whole thing, and then we find out Geonor is being manipulated by somebody, and then we got to go chase her down, and then it's like her and isn't like Jamon Ra like a sibling or something of hers, and he, it has this whole epic thing where we just ran through this massive dreadnought zone, and we can talk about whether that zone's a little bit too big or not. That's not the part of the conversation here. We know how big it is though, and he just casually slices that whole thing off like it's nothing. Just a single swipe of the sword and it's gone, and you're like, wow, okay, this is pretty epic. And then we get into Act 3 and there's like this massive jungle, and there's all this crazy stuff happening with this like ancient civilization, and then suddenly we're teleported back in time. And for PoE 1 players, you get this added Easter egg of like, oh, this is actually the young version of Alva prior to the one that we met in the old game. Like, we're the reason that she knows how to do that stuff we were doing in PoE 1. So like, and then we get to go fight Doriani, who's like, he's got his name all over. We've checked out his institute and we've worn his prototype, and our mercenaries have all worn his prototype. And like, we get to, we get to experience who is that character. And like Balbala was another example. Like I didn't know who Balbala was. It was the name of one of the, characters from a timeless jewel in PoE 1. But like we get to meet her and fight her and free her from, I guess like decades or maybe centuries of imprisonment. And then she's like, hey, you want to go check out these trials with me? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think I do. I think I do want to check out those trials with you. Let's go. And then like, yeah, I don't know. The campaign for that game was incredible. And I thought like the way we ascended, a lot of people, I think I've heard a lot of people complain about having to do the Trial of the Sekimas or the Chaos Trials. Like, Lab is my least favorite content in Path of Exile 1. I hate it. It's a chore. I run it exactly as many times as I need to get my character 4 ascendancies, and then I don't touch it again until I start another character. But like I ran both of those mechanics as like a break from map sometimes, and I enjoyed it. Like especially, on that demon witch character that I mentioned, the Infernalist, like she was great at running both of those, especially the trials, because you have that like really zippy like demon form dodge, and you could just zoom through there, and you have a ton of damage, so you can blast things before they get to you. I genuinely liked running it, and it felt a little more balanced in terms of the loot that I got than like pre 326 PoE 1 Sanctum, where like I wasn't just like, oh, I'm here for the divines. It's just the divines. Give me the divines. Like I got to like, oh, there's like these different chests, and then I found out, oh, some of them have like special rewards in them, and like that boss at the end, outside of the first time I fought him, because like I'll be honest, putting a true one-shot mechanic in to something that's tied to getting your ascendancy, and they sort of address this too, right? Like I think he's a little bit less of a problem with this regard. But I was, when you've only got one key and you're fighting for your life and trying to get your character's first ascendancy, and he comes up and gives you the little tap on the shoulder, and you're just gone, and you're like, well, it might be 10 hours before I see another one of those keys. So, and like that was frustrating, and not in a great way, but like that was a really well designed boss, other than that particular like niche case of it. Like he was one of the coolest like time themed bosses I feel like I've ever fought in anything. Yeah, I don't know. I think the campaign for that's great, and I think the campaign for PoE 1 is definitely at least a few steps of quality underneath it. but at the same time, like it has its own fun and quirks to it. Like I would encourage anybody who is a PoE1 player who feels like the campaign is a chore, when you're done having your end game fun for the league and you still maybe have a little bit of itch left for the game, just try to go faster. Try to learn how to speed run the campaign even a little bit. You don't have to be Tai Killer or Havoc or Alex Plublord or Ben or any of these people. Just try to be better than yourself. And, do that. Do like 2 or 3 runs through the campaign, and then like you're done playing for the league. And when you come back next league, the campaign's going to feel so much better. And then you're like, okay, let me see if I can, beat my old time on it. And it becomes fun because then you're competing with yourself and you're seeing yourself get better at something rather than just, I have to get through this so that I can do the stuff I want.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think this all kind of goes full circle into sort of that initial first statement that you made about I have a bunch of friends. They all tried PoE1. They never even got to maps. But those same friends got into PoE2 and they got to maps and they're, enjoying the game and probably played for a lot longer. And that was one of the biggest realizations that I sort of made after playing through Path of Exile was that they really are so hyper aware of the new player experience in PoE2. The onboarding and the new player experience is so damn good, and the campaign experience is so good. And that's the way that new players are experiencing the game. So that is what has to hook you. That you can't, everyone says, or everyone had told me, Blaze, you just need to get through the campaign and suffer for the first little bit and then get to maps. And that's when the game truly opens up. And it's true. It does feel like, the end game of PoE and the campaign are 2 completely different games. But with Path of Exile 1, with Path of Exile 2, it feels much more like a seamless experience and progression from, the Clearfell area basically into maps. And not so much as a giant like tutorial for the game, but more so just like an experience basically that it's gonna hook you. And if you get to maps, they are gonna own your soul, which is what they want.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see like where the story for the game goes with the next 3 acts and like what kind of cool bosses we get. And it was nice to like get to explore what felt like a larger chunk of this world than what we got in PoE1. And honestly, like even just from like a system standpoint, like when I think about like the very, very base framework of both games, even now, knowing that I like Path of Exile 1 quite a bit more than PoE2 in their current state, I feel like PoE1 is like that anime character that worked really, really, really hard, and they're a badass, but like they had to work really, really hard for it. And PoE2 to me feels like that character that's got insane potential, but they need 300 episodes to get there. Like I think like the framework of the game is just so much better. Like the skill gem system, for example. Like I don't have to worry about getting like colors in my sockets, and I don't pick up a piece of gear and go, well, this would be great if only it had 2 red sockets in it. Like, and I can have more things supported by more gems, and the support gems do more things than just a bunch of damage. Like I think all of that's really good. And I think that I genuinely like that I care about picking up more pieces of gear. I just don't think I have enough ways to meaningfully interact with them yet. But like I hear people say like, oh, we need scours and alts back. And I'm like, as much as, like people who've been on my stream have seen me literally today, I spammed through 3,000 alts, making rings for my merc, right? Yeah. Like I got no problem with that. I don't mind it. But I think it's better not having it. Like I think it's cool that like I'm out here going, okay, I need to pick up, from when I was playing, it's like I need to pick up more expert gothic quarterstaffs. I think it has like they named all of those expert and advanced things like their own actual names now, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. But like it's cool to have to go out and find more bases. I just want more ways to meaningfully interact with them that aren't just, slam and pray. And am I mad about it? No, because I know they're going to add those at some point. Like,
yeah, totally, man. Yeah, I'm really happy that you brought up the skill gem system. That was another thing that sort of was sort of added onto my onboarding and new player experience was the difference between the way that they go about it in Path of Exile 1 versus Path of Exile 2. I really do think that Path of Exile 2 is such a massive improvement on that because you're absolutely right. I was finding gear all the time, but playing, especially as an SSF player, like, chromatic orbs were quite rare for me, and so I wasn't able to like necessarily tailor all the gear to the way that I wanted. And it really felt like I was either finding gear that had perfect sockets, maybe it even had like a 5 or 6 link on it at one point, but the mods were bad, or I found items with really great mods, but I had such a hard time getting them to be 5 or 6 linked with the right colors and stuff like that. So there was a lot of friction that I felt with like my gear and having them be tied to my skills and stuff like that. And at one point, I had like a 6 link mace that I downgraded to like a 4 link, but the damage was just way crazier on the 4 links. I was like, oh, I have to take the L on that until I can make it a 6 link somehow. But yeah, I just felt like with PoE 2, I was much more encouraged to like experiment with different support gems. Once you have, you know, uh, you know, quite a few that you can kind of spend to like experiment with. It felt like I was encouraged to do that. Whereas with PoE 1, it felt like I was very much so, almost like Diablo 2, where it's like you're putting your points in, it's harder to refund them. You're getting your items with your certain sockets and colors, it's way harder to change those. And once you sort of commit to what you're working on, that's sort of the path that you had to take. Like I found a pretty cool, like unique mace off those mercenaries who were freaking cool. Are they too strong? Probably, but they were really super fun to interact with. And I found a lot of like uniques off of those mercenaries, especially through the campaign. But a lot of those uniques I couldn't play around with because I guess this isn't really items or sockets, but the passive system in PoE 1 was it's very like you feel like you're committing. You do get quite a few refund points, but it's like those are like a finite resource that you have, and getting those orbs of regret costs quite a bit to like trade up to. So it felt like now that I had dedicated, I was doing like a two-handed mace like Sunder build. I was doing that, and I could not like experiment with one-handed maces because I had already specced into the two-handed tree and like two-handed weapon stuff. And so yeah, they're two very different games, but one feels very much so about like your commitment to your character, and whereas PoE 2 is a lot more like forgiving in terms of if you wanted to like especially with the gold respec costs, it's easy to like respec and try something else if you want.
For sure. Though the one thing I would like to see, and like I've seen this suggestion, other places, and I think it's amazing to kind of further allow you to like experiment a little more. I don't know that we'll ever see it. I would really, really love to see for perfect jewelers to work on a slot for your character rather than working on the actual skill gem itself. Like, my character now has one 6-link ability. And that way, because like it's not too bad to use, lesser jewelers or maybe even just a regular jewelers on something, but those perfect jewelers are rare. And if you're in SSF, you don't get very many of them. If you're in trade, they're quite expensive. At least they were last time I played. And so I felt like if I wanted to 6-link something, I had to be, dead sure of it. And I feel like it would be way cooler for me to go, okay, well, now I have a 6-link on my character. Like, I can decide, okay, let's see if this skill is good. Oh, it didn't really work out. And on top of that, in Trade League especially, like, in SSF, like if you only get so many of them anyway, so it's like if you use it, you use it. But in Trade League, like you feel more incentivized to I just it's another thing with balance where like I don't want to see people push to where they feel forced to do meta things, right? And if you're in Trade League and you use your perfect jewelers on a skill that nobody else wants to buy, well, you're just wasting that money. Whereas like if you were to use it, in patch 1 you use it on Spark, or in patch 2 you use it on Lightning Spear, you can always someone's going to buy your 6-link Lightning Spear, And so I feel like that's just another thing that nudges people towards only playing the meta stuff. And like I'm, I don't know how familiar you are with like Magic or like the Timmy Johnny Spike thing. Like I'm pretty Spike through and through. Like I don't mind playing the meta or playing what's best. But like I don't want to feel like I have to. And I especially don't want other people to feel like they have to, because like just because I'm like that doesn't mean everyone else is like that. And the more people that can enjoy the game means the more people I can talk to about the game, the more people that are having like a shared experience with me. And that means a lot to me.
100%. And boy, I am so happy they buffed the drops to perfect jeweler's orbs. So I've been playing SSF basically since like point 1. I had a brief stint in Trade League when I first got into PoE 2. I played for about 250 hours or so. I got sort of fed up with the trade system. Side note, the news about a new trade system that's going to be implemented prior to the launch of the game. Oh my god, play the holy music. Like that is actually gonna like potentially make me log into like hardcore trade now instead of SSF because I just got really fed up with the trade system. We don't need to go into that unless you want to talk about it more, but it's flawed for sure.
For
But
sure.
yeah, like I never found a perfect jeweler's orb playing on like hardcore SSF in point one. And so I was doing like trial master at like level 92 with like a 4 link. Like it was like brutal, dude. But in Dawn of the Hunt, like they did I'm not sure if you're aware, but they did a whole sort of buff to a lot of things, loot being one of them. And one of the things that they increased the drops of heavily were greater jeweler's orbs and perfect jeweler's orbs. And that just completely changed the whole dynamic where now I don't feel like I'm forced to basically play the meta, as you said. I feel like I can have, more I guess more flexibility with what I'm greater jeweler's orbs specifically because there's so many of them now. It's like having a 5 link is no big deal. Greater jeweler or perfects are still rare, but like you come across them enough where if you're playing enough throughout a league, you're gonna have all 6 links. Like eventually, like it's
Okay.
probably in like a couple weeks you'll have like all 6 links.
So
And
like it's at a point where, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no
like it's at
worries.
a point in SSF now where you feel like if you want to, like if you've experimented with the skill in a 5 link and you feel like you like it reasonably, you can use that 6 link without worrying about later wanting to switch because you will find another one sooner probably rather than later.
100%. And it's gotten to the
Okay.
point with greater jeweler's orbs now where like if you're struggling for perfects, there's no issue like valuing them. It's like you end up getting them so frequently. Just on stream, I found a greater jeweler's orb off of like Viper and Act 3 normal. Like it was just like that's
Hmm.
something that you don't normally would have never seen in like point one. So it's gotten to the point now where yes, you can obtain a 6 link quite easily. Either finding a perfect or just valuing up a greater. You'll eventually hit the right val for sure.
Okay. That's pretty
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. And there's a bunch of these changes that they made to the PoE too that I feel like have accumulated to like the experience. Like Dawn of the Hunt just doesn't even feel like Dawn of the Hunt anymore. That sounds weird to say, but like it's gone through such a weird transformation from like point two to like 0.21. Especially with like the new like unique items and stuff. But so there's a couple other things that I wanted to talk about with you. I want to check in with you first. We're like an hour and 20 minutes. How are you doing and how are you feeling?
Oh, I'm fine. Professional yapper. I'll keep talking as long as you'll have me on. I do at some point need to eat some food, but that's not particularly time sensitive. So I'm in no rush for time as long as you want to keep talking.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, me too, dude. This has been a super fun chat. Been lovely like having you on the podcast. So yeah, thank you. And we'll keep going for a few more questions. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Maybe like another like 20 minutes or something. We'll see. Yeah, but as long as that's cool with you.
Yeah, perfect.
Uh,
Thanks for being considerate. Appreciate it.
of course, man. Yeah, I know that I say on like the sheet like 1 to 2 hours, but that's quite a big gap. And so yeah, gotta check in with the guests, make sure they're doing good. So I wanted to ask you, with PoE 2, we're talking about these, the relationship between PoE 1 and PoE 2. What are some of the things that you think that could be brought over from PoE 1 that would make PoE 2 a better game?
Hmm, it's tough because like I don't want to see I don't want to just see league mechanics from PoE 1 just get ported over because like I want PoE 2 to have its own thing, right? And I feel like they did for like there's two really good examples of like the opposite end of the spectrum for me. Breach in PoE 2 feels wildly different to me than the way it feels in PoE 1. Like breach rings are a desirable base. They managed to do a thing that made those interesting for people. Breach monsters feel more like individually threatening as opposed to like, you know, one of the things that Breach is really good for in PoE 1, leveling, because those guys are not particularly likely to kill you once you're on a fairly tanky character. And so even though you have this like rift into another dimension and there's demons everywhere, it's like they're like a bunch of inflatable arm tube guy things. Whereas like you pop open a Breach in PoE 2 and it's like the salty spittoon, man. It's these just like very threatening things and you're like, all right, we're here, we're in it. And like the breach stone itself felt like more of a real encounter. And like I felt like Breach was done in a way that felt true to PoE 1 but still did its own thing in PoE 2. On the opposite end is Delirium. And I feel like Delirium in PoE 2 feels just like soulless and kind of empty to me. Like Simulacrum didn't really feel meaningfully different from PoE 1 in any way, and the only ways that it did feel different were just worse, right? Like monsters shoving you around the arena, which I think I've heard that's also been addressed at least a little bit in like recent patches. But like I don't know, it didn't feel like it did its own thing at all, and it didn't really feel like there was any reason for it to fit in. Like another thing about Breach that was cool is like there felt like there was an advancement of the Breach story in some way. Like as a PoE 1 player, I'm like, what happened to Esh and Tool and we sort of get the idea that maybe this guy who's, smacking us down like a fly, maybe he did something to them because like he seems like he's quite a bit bigger and badder than they are. And I wonder, I'm like, so what did happen to them? Like, did he kill them? Did they merge to become him? Like, what's going on here? And so like it made me interested where I was like, okay, yeah, Kosis, Omni, I've seen you guys before, blah, blah, blah. Just give me the jewel, please. Like, just give me the jewel or the flask and we'll be fine. Um, so if they're gonna bring over more mechanics, I want to see them done in a way that feels more authentic to PoE 2 and not just like fan service for PoE 1 players. And then I think, I mean, honestly, a lot of it's just like crafting too, right? Like I want to, without just bringing over alterations and scours, I want to see more interesting ways to interact with my items. And like, essences are cool in PoE 2, but at the same time, like it only fills the role of a transmute or a regal. Like, why don't we have an essence that fills the role of an exalt? Or why can't I maybe have a separate currency where like, oh, I find some different orb, like, and I can use it on a different piece of crafting currency and give it a different effect. Like maybe I can infuse my greater essence and now it can take the function of an exalted orb or a chaos orb or something like that. Can we have, something like maybe it doesn't have to be fossils, but something like that is cool. Or like, and like one of the biggest just quality of life things, and I know they've talked about they think that this is bad for balance, but I think that that's like a bozo cop out. And I don't say negative things about GGG pretty lightly because again, I got a lot of respect for what they do, and I think they do an amazing thing. Why is res swapping not in the game? It's not an interesting pain point for me to find that my gear has fire res and I need lightning res. I don't think that's interesting or cool, and I don't think it makes the game harder in a meaningful way. I think it's just annoying. And I like there's a lot of times where I listen to them talk about game balance and I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about that. When I heard them talk about the res swap, I was just like, I think that's a big L take, honestly. And I like, we don't need the entire harvest bench, right? Like, but having some way to swap resistances around, because when you find a piece of gear, and especially this probably means, I've played some SSF, so I'm familiar, but I probably actually have less SSF experience than you do, is my guess. It feels terrible if you're like, oh my god, this piece of gear is insane, but it says fire resistance on it instead of lightning resistance, and now I gotta swap around everything else that I'm doing just to make this new piece of gear work, and maybe I wind up using a much worse ring just to make it happen, and like, I just don't think that's an interesting pain point. Like, I don't want the game to feel too easy. I'm super down for a challenge, but like, that's not challenging. That's just chores, man.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, so this is a great segue into itemization, which is another thing that I wanted to talk about with you. Itemization in PoE 2 is not amazing, but it's not bad. I feel like it's at a critical moment right now where they have all of these, as you say, like fundamental pieces. Like, dude, essences and like PoE 1 are so freaking cool in comparison to essences in PoE 2. We're like, yeah, it's like the tip of the iceberg where they have this giant iceberg, but they're only showing you like the tip right now because there's so much more cool stuff that they could do with them. Like whenever I found an essence in PoE 1, I was like, hell yes, I can make a cool rare with this. Like, like let's go. And they were like much more challenging opponents to fight than they were in like PoE 2 for the most part. But I think the rewards were worth it, right?
Yeah.
But for PoE 2, I feel like with itemization, the game makes it your gear, especially later on. Your whole setup is a very like configured puzzle that you've sort of solved. So, we talk about resistances. Your gear is very much so like each piece is sort of filling a void for a specific point of your defenses, your life, your damage, blah, 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 blah. And so replacing that becomes increasingly difficult over time as you min-max more. And I think this has a heavy implication on unique items. So coming from an SSF standpoint specifically, there's very rare situations in the game where I'm finding a rare, let's use body armor, for example. I'm finding a rare body armor that drops on the ground that's like an insta equip, because in SSF and especially in HC SSF, your body armor is like one of the biggest sources of your defenses. Like if you have a, a great piece of body armor with like 1k evasion, 300 plus energy shield, like getting rid of that alone for maybe a particularly cool body armor is just usually not enough of a trade-off. You know what I mean? Like I've always wanted to play around with like a tabula rasa, and I have one in my stash, but like there's nothing on that damn thing except for like 6 jewel slots. So it's like, you know, I feel like there's what I'm trying to say is in PoE 2 right now, it feels like there's too much of a like a sort of a negative to a lot of these unique items, where I wish there were some, not all. I'm not saying all of unique items need to be like this, but like in Diablo 2, like when that thing drops, and you don't see that item very often, but when that thing drops, you're like, oh, I got that unique item. That's an insta equip. That's a massive dopamine hit. I feel like we're just missing those. You know what I mean? Like those like insta equip dope ass unique items that are just like a, awesome,
Every single D2 player remembers the first Stone of Jordan they dropped. Just saying. Like
100%. 100%, dude.
And to add on to that, I wish I had said this when you had mentioned like what do I want to see over. Honestly, the biggest thing, and I like just bring the crafting bench over. Like it's one mod at a weaker tier. It's like usually crafting bench is like significantly weaker tier than the best tier or even the second best tier that you can get. And I understand that they say that the jewel sockets are supposed to fill this need, but then there's a big problem with when you bring in these like chase jewel sockets, right? Like these chase socketables, and you're never going to want to replace those, right? Like if you've got, if you're SSF, you might not ever find another one. And if you're trade, it probably costs you a handful of divines at least to get one. So you're never going to replace it. But how is that supposed to be my way to fix little problems with my gear if I'm being incentivized to socket these incredibly powerful chase jewels or runes or whatever the case is in there? Like I can sort of understand why they wanted to do something different, but I don't really see why socketables and the crafting bench can't coexist. Like, what if, like, let's, as just like a baseline, this isn't exact, but like as a baseline, let's say the crafting bench in PoE lets you craft on like a tier 3.5, right? What if we bumped it down to like a 4.5, make it even weaker, but let me have some level of complete determinism over one singular mod on my item. And then the socketables can exist too. And they, for players who are at a lower point in their progression, they can use it to fix problems. For players who are getting to that giga min max, they can put in these chase socketables they get and know that they've got some way to like play around with their gear and change it as their needs change. Like, if anything from PoE 1 made it over, honestly, it's the crafting bench. Like, and I'm okay with it being weaker. Just bring it over, man. Like, it's, I don't know. I don't think they will, but it'd be a lot cooler if they did.
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like they've really doubled down on the whole socketables being, Jonathan has mentioned in various interviews that like the, socketing system in PoE 2 is essentially the replacement. I don't know if that's the right word for it, because it's certainly not a replacement, but it's the PoE 2's version of the crafting bench. And you're absolutely right. It's not at this current stage enough determinatives right now. You might be I always look at it from an SSF standpoint, but you may not necessarily have the right rune that you want. You may not necessarily have as many as you need for that moment. And so they did buff like you get like 12 artificial orbs now throughout the campaign. So you can be socketing things constantly and like swapping things around and stuff like that, and more rune drops too. But you're absolutely right. Like, one thing that I did find that actually gave me that moment was one of those new, like really rare, like socketables. So like, it gives you like flat damage, that like the only thing that is a socketable that adds flat physical damage, and you can put it into gloves. And I found those and I put them into my like double socketed, like Hands of Wisdom in action. And I was like, yo, these gloves are fucking sick now. Like they got flat damage, they got lightning damage, like, but I'm never replacing it now because I don't know if I'm ever going to find another one of those again. And so if I need to somehow tinker with my build, that socket is just off limits now forever, basically. So Yeah, I don't know. I there's a part of me that likes the fact that they're trying to do something new here, but there's a part of me that also can see how good, like especially from playing PoE one, how nice it was to just be like, oh, I'm missing a certain affix or a certain modifier on my armor. Let's just hit the crafting bench, sort that out, and move on with my day. I don't have to like find another item or something else to tinker with it. So we'll see, man. I don't know, but I really want the unique items to be better in the game because I think that they have a lot of interesting ones. Like there's ones that like have really cool modifiers on them. Like there's, for instance, there's a pair of gloves that like let strength fulfill all the requirements of like, all of your skill gems and items basically, which is cool. But the rest of that item is bad. Like there's the defense on it are trash. There's no other usable, there's no flat damage, there's no other resistances. It's basically like a level 4 item, but it has this cool thing that it allows you to do. And I feel like they need to merge some of these items or allow us to upgrade them to a higher tier. Like, how in Diablo 2, you could take a unique, put it in the Haraja cube, throw some things in, and you could bump it up from like a normal item, like to a nightmare item, or a nightmare item to like a hell
Yeah,
item.
yeah. Get like
I
the higher base type, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be super cool to have in PoE too, because it would allow for a lot of these like lower level items to have like newfound love and use and like more builds like down the road, or else they become way too like niche and way too specific. And oftentimes the trade-off is not good.
We've even seen something like a somewhat similar issue in PoE 1 recently, because when they added in the new armor base types, a lot of especially unique body armors wound up kind of falling by the wayside. Like prior to things like necrotic armor and Twilight Regalia getting added to the game, you would see quite a few people running things like Defiance of Destiny, not Defiance of Destiny, that's the amulet. The Fourth Vow, that's the it's this chess piece, and I wish I could. I can't even remember what it does now, which is crazy because it used to be like a pretty sought after item. And it basically was like, okay, well, yeah, these most of these chess pieces are no longer that valuable because they're competing. Like, how on earth is this unique supposed to compete when I can get a rare that gives me 1300 energy shield? Like, there's no way it competes with that. And I definitely agree with you that like I'd like to see, because there were quite a few uniques in PoE 2 where when I'm playing I see this and I'm like, this is cool, except it's on a toothpick. Like it's on an item that I outscaled in Act 1. So how am I supposed to use it in the end game, even though it has this badass line of text that does something really interesting and cool? I think you're definitely onto something with like keeping those uniques and having some ability, even if it's like you'd want it to be pretty rare, right? Because you don't want people to just willy-nilly slam it on everything, but just common enough to where like if you find some in SSF here and there, and like if you've got one of those uniques where you're looking at it and you're like, man, this would be really good if only it actually gave me some armor or evasion or energy shield or whatever the case is. Because like your socketables in those sort of cases do kind of allow you to be like, okay, this item doesn't give me resistance and I need a bit of resistance, and like I think that that's a good place for that. But it felt like the only uniques that saw play were the ones that were truly busted, right? Like Hand of Wisdom in action is and I think Hand of Wisdom in action, honestly, I don't even know that it was that busted so much as there just weren't very many other scaling vectors. And so, like, if you're an attack build, you were kind of forced to use it because there really wasn't another good way. I feel like that item wouldn't seem nearly as busted, even if you just took the exact item and dropped it into PoE 1, because there's a lot of other competition, right? It's like,
Yes.
when you're a kid and you go on your cul-de-sac and you play GoldenEye and you kick everybody's ass and you're the best GoldenEye player, and then you go to the next cul-de-sac and their best player is way better than you, and then you go on the internet and you find out none of you guys are good. You're all bad. Like,
Yeah.
that unique
Yeah.
in PoE 2 maybe looks good, but you drop it into PoE 1 and it's just another solid item.
100%. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I really hope that in the patch notes, when point 3 gets announced for PoE 2, that there is a comprehensive list of new uniques, because there just needs to be more competition. There needs to be more items that are as good as Hands of Wisdom in action. And you're absolutely right. Like they're not like they toned them down for Dawn of the Hunt. They were probably a little bit too crazy with the attack speed and flat lightning damage in point 1, but as they stand right now, they got 2 really cool attribute based like things where they give you attack speed and flat damage based on your attributes, plus those attributes, plus like a decent amount of defense. Like they're not like crazy, but I have them on my character. It added quite a bit of damage, and there just needs to be more of those where it's like, they're not like holy shit, like I don't know what an item would be like. Maybe I don't know, Temporalis or Astramentus or something like insane, where like it gives you something way more of a perk than any other item could, but just a lot more of those like healthy and solid unique items that like are a viable option instead of like a good rare, because right now rares are just too strong. Like I don't know how it is in PoE 1, but like a lot of the times like it seems like, yeah, the rares, especially when you craft a good one in PoE 1, it just seems like it's hard to replace those,
I feel like because there's more options available in PoE 1, there is a decent balance. And like for certain builds, like the build I'm currently playing, nice example of this, like I'm using unique sword, Rakiata's Dance, and like it's a tier 0 unique, but it's not mage blood where it's like ubiquitous and anybody can use it, so the price stays at a reasonable place. Like I could go on the trade site right now and copies of that sword for right around 1 divine, and that doesn't make it cheap, but like that's relatively cheap, right? Like I mean, it's not too bad for a player to get in trade. And for an SSF player, for example, it's the only unique on its base type. And so if you wanted to target farm one, you could just run ritual until you get it. I mean, it's a really rare omen, but like you could run ritual until you get an omen of fortune and then smack it onto that sword and you're guaranteed to get that sword. And like, is it possible to beat it with a rare? Yeah, if I want to make a perfect triple synth implicit rare with 5x tier 1 item or mods and stuff. But like I was comparing it with some really, really nice swords that I made in like Path of Exile, and it was beating them. And then like for my gloves, I got this pair of gloves that's like it gives me +10 to fortification. And it's like it's a unique drop from the Uber Exarch fight. It's really low drop rate, but also the price stays relatively manageable. Like it's still like 40 divine orbs, 50 divine orbs, but like for a 1% drop rate from an Uber, that's not crazy when you compare to like Mage Blood that can drop anywhere, but also anyone can slap it on, and it's 230 divine, right? I'd love to see more of these uniques in both games, honestly, that are like, this isn't something you can just slap and plug and play on any build, but for 5% of builds, it's going to be the best possible thing they can get. And then it's like, how do I build the rest of it around? Because rares are always going to be strong, and we want rares to be strong. Like that's good for the game. But you want these build around uniques too that make you say, okay, I can make an entire character around this item, and then I figure out what other uniques work well with that. I take up maybe like 2 to 4 slots with uniques, and then I fill the rest with rares that fill all the holes that I need. I'd love to see more of that.
For sure, for sure. And we saw that a little bit in Dawn of the Hunt, but in the wrong way with, of course, Tankle Tongue being like the build-defining unique item for Lightning Spear, but also on a level 26 base item, so you can find it in Act 2. And it was like why is this crazy powerful spear in Act 2 and also like a meta item? It just felt like they kind of missed the mark with that one. So yeah, just reformatting these uniques would be incredible, and just adding more options in both games, I think is, no one's going to say no to more items, because more items just mean more possibilities for builds and for, different things. So yeah, but that, again, that's just a thing that's going to come with time. 100%. So one other thing that I wanted to sort of ask you about was, did you have a chance to watch the Chris Wilson and David Brevik interview that he released a couple days ago?
I have not. I know that it's a thing, and Chris seems very cool, but also I really haven't had too much time for anything outside of like I make time with my girlfriend. We watch just watching TV is like one of the things we do together, and like we'll play board games sometimes. But like we've been watching the new series of Taskmaster, which if you're not hip to that UK show, you can watch full episodes on YouTube. It's an incredible like comedy sort of like competition show. I don't need to get too much into it. Check that out. It's amazing.
Oh, that's cool. My girlfriend works in reality TV, so she like is a producer on like a bunch of Canadian reality TV shows, and so reality TV is always on in our house, in her house, and yeah, it's a good time, man. Thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I haven't had much time to really check out any sort of other content. Like I even like content creators that I normally check out a lot of their stuff. Like I haven't been making time for that because all of the time that I have for gaming and Path of Exile has been getting poured into being live and trying to make good content that helps out the people that are already there and draws more people into my stream in the first place. Because like that's the two goals I have with the content. I want to help out the people that I'm already hanging out with, and I want to help out more people so more of them want to come into my stream because I need more, I need to grow the stream for it to be sustainable for me to do it the amount of time that I want to. And so yeah, I just like I haven't done a good job of like keeping up with what other meta builds are. I haven't done a great job of like, like what are the other meta farms? I hear little bits about them here and there from like people bringing them up in stream, like, oh, like this abyss farm is a thing, or like people, earlier in the league, people are using these ethereal all flames, and like I loosely know that those farms exist, but I don't know, what does the tree look like, all that stuff. So yeah, I know that this exists, right? Like, that Chris has started a new project, and that's sick. I'm definitely interested in it, but I don't think I really like. It's kind of the same with PoE 2, what it was for me before it came out. I don't tend to let myself get super hype about something before it happens, because like I think maybe this is like something to talk to with a therapist about, not like a thing to go deep on a podcast, but like I'm afraid of disappointment. I'm afraid of things not being in reality what I've built them up to in my wild imaginative brain. And so like with PoE 2, I didn't let myself get hyped for it until like the week beforehand. And then it was like, my first Christmas, right? Like the whole week was like not like, honestly, I really didn't even do much until the night before. The night before 0.1 dropped, I was in bed just going through everything, like looking through every single gem and every single class and being like, what am I going to play tomorrow? I haven't done any prep because I didn't want to get, and like, so it's like same kind of thing. Like, am I excited for it? 100%. Chris Wilson's behind it. He made like, he helped start Path of Exile 1, which is my favorite, my favorite non-story based game of all time. And I'm sure it's going to be great, but I don't really have a lot of time to put towards like the speculation or like building up hype, and I'm sure it's going to change 8 million times before it comes out. So like any information I get now is subject to be useless later. So I don't know. Maybe I'm weird for thinking like that, but it is what it is.
I hear you. I hear you. So that particular tidbit of information was actually dropped at the very, very end of a what I would call a beautiful conversation between two ARPG visionaries. But that wasn't the focus of the conversation at all. That was like, oh, and by the way, I started my own company and I'm not talking about it, but I'm making a game and it's with a team of like 3 people. But because you really loved Diablo 2, and maybe you still love Diablo 2, or it holds a place in your heart from ARPG standpoint, and of course, Path of Exile being something that you are still enjoying to this day. If you can make time for any content, I would really recommend you watch that interview because it was just a beautiful chat between like 2 like cool dudes. Like obviously David Brevik is like an OG and somebody who like inspired Chris Wilson to like create grinding gear games and create an ARPG. Like they wanted to make the sequel to Diablo 2. That was the whole purpose for making Path of Exile. So, and it was on the like 25th anniversary of Diablo 2. So honestly, when I saw that like drop and it was like Chris Wilson's first YouTube video, I was like, this is it. Like I'm sitting down tonight, I'm making popcorn and I'm listening to these guys talk about ARPGs because like it was just so cool, man. So if you get a chance to like, I don't know, carve out some time for it, I highly recommend it. It was such a good chat, bro. So fucking good. So let's end off with a classic question that I want to always try and ask all of my guests, especially because you yourself have just gone through sort of like a new shift, not new, but like a shift in your life where you've kind of made, a different career choice, basically. I would love to ask, what is some advice that you can maybe give to some people who are looking to maybe start creating content or are looking to maybe make a shift in their life and start working on that more? Do you have any sort of advice from your own experiences that you'd like to share with any listeners out there?
Obviously, I'm still pretty new to this, and I am still very much learning how to do this in a way that is both authentic to myself and capable of being successful. So I feel Like nothing I say is just, going to be like, oh, like this is what you got to do. But honestly, the two things that I think are the most important, make sure that you're genuinely having fun when you're doing it, like 100%. And make sure you know how to be nice to yourself, because there's days where it's really, really, really fucking hard. And I, um, I've had plenty of days where I'm just like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if it's ever going to get to a place where it's sustainable. Maybe I should just stop. And I keep doing it through those days because I like doing it. And I like doing more than just like playing video games. Like playing video games is cool, but like when I'm sitting down and making a video, I actually have a lot of fun with that part. And I've had fun learning how to do thumbnails, and I have fun getting to like meet people at least as much as you can. Like I don't know the people in my chat, even like I don't know them personally, right? Like I know a lot about them and they maybe know a lot about me, but we've never hung out face to face. And it's still really cool to just like get to meet new people and have an impact on them, and they have an impact back. So I think just like people will, and there's like two things that are sort of, I try to keep this brief. People will always tell you like, oh, like you have to do it for fun and like don't think about the money. But like if you're doing anything full time, you have to think about the money a little bit, right? Because if you don't make money, it's not sustainable. You can't continue to do it full time. Otherwise, you won't have food and you won't have a place to live. But if it's something like, if it's something that's so fun that it would be worth making like the bare minimum amount of money that you would need to survive, and you would still want to do it in that case, I think that's worth it. And then, like I said, just like make sure you're prepared to be nice to yourself on your worst days. Cause like it's really hard when you post a video and you're super excited about it, and then you look and 5 days later it has less views than you have subscribers. Like that makes you feel really, really bad. Or like, you know, at like PoE 2 launch, I was really excited. I'm like, oh, it's this new game and it's so exciting. And then my views took like a 70% plummet, like my viewers on my channel, from when I was doing my HCSSF run to Ubers in PoE 1. And I was like, well, why is this happening? Like, is it because like I suck at streaming? And it's like, no, it's happening because like people inevitably when the new game comes out are going to like, you know, they're going to converge on these big names, and I don't blame them for that. You know, like we saw like people like Darth Microtransaction, who like I don't know him personally, but the image he's given on his content, he seems like a cool guy, and he seems like he tries his best to not make garbage content. Like he tries to like actually give like, you know, a take that's like, and a lot of times like, you know, I'll see his title is like very sensationalist, right? And then you click on it and he's got this like really good nuanced take about something, and I'm like, I love that. I love that he's like doing the thing that makes you click on it and get interested, and then he's giving like a nuanced take. And like again, I don't know this guy personally, but just like, I don't know, like there's going to be a lot of days making content where you're going to feel unsure about it, and it's okay. Just like be nice to yourself when that shit happens, and like know that the next time something really cool happens to you, you're going to feel like it's worth it. And if those things don't feel like they're true, pull back, put less time into it, you know, split up your time, do it as like a fun thing on the side, and do it because the part of you that has fun likes doing it. Cause like it's gonna be really stressful if you try to do this as like a full-time thing. And every other like content creator I've talked to, the people who've kind of like mentored me, have kind of like echoed this, like this is hard and it's stressful and you're gonna feel bad about it sometimes. And I'm especially prone to those things happening, just mental health stuff. So like I don't know. That's pretty much it, honestly. Because as far as the technical aspect, I'm winging it and learning my best every day too. So
Right on, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I feel like, you know, just because you think you're like, you know, relatively new at it doesn't like invalidate your experiences or the, you know, the sort of like feedback or the advice that you can give. Like you're still going through it, you're still like figuring it out, but like you still have like, you know, stuff that you know that people may not know right now. You know what I mean? Like, you know, the be nice to yourself, that is like so easy to say on paper, but so hard to do like in practice. Like do you have like a, I don't know what you'd call it, like a system of thinking that like helps you sort of take like remove yourself from that train of thought? Like what is your strategy for doing that? Because I need help with that sometimes too. You know what I mean? So what's your go-to on that?
I really, it's maybe not 100% the best, but like I rely pretty heavily on like outside positive reinforcement. And one of the things about gaming, and especially like when I was big into competitive gaming with like DDR, is that like there's a concrete result screen in front of me. It tells me that I'm good at this. So no matter how much I feel like I'm a bozo idiot who can't do anything right, the screen tells me, no, actually, you're very good at this. And I also, when it came to music, I didn't have that screen necessarily, but there most days for a really long time, I was like, man, I'm not actually very good at this whole thing. Like I'm not good on stage and my voice is trash and blah blah blah. But like, and some days like that would be so bad where people would tell me like, oh, like I love your voice, I love your music, and I would in my back of my head, I'm like, you must have the worst taste ever. You must be such a bozo. You don't know what you're talking about. And like that's not great. But like um the more I grow and the more people are hanging out and I see like, I run like a music based event on Saturdays. I basically had this inspiration to like, let's have like emo night at home. So we listen to like music that you would hear at emo night, like Panic at the Disco and My Chemical Romance and like some, Alexis on Fire, all these sorts of like
Nice.
bands
My partner
across
would
that
love
kind of
that.
spectrum.
Can she come? She would be
Yeah,
all she would be
absolutely.
all
I
about
mean,
that.
as long as she, is willing to tolerate us playing Path of Exile as well.
She tolerates
I
me doing that, so it's all good.
Hell yeah. No, yeah, I try to do like a music and like I've had people come into the stream on Saturday and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy you're live. It's Scene Kids Saturday, dude. Let's go." And like that makes me excited, Like there's people in other countries who are excited for my goofy ass to show up on their screen. Like that's awesome. And if I'm feeling bad about myself, it's easy to like, if I can look at those things, I can remember like, you're allowed to feel bad about yourself. Maybe you're right. Maybe you are a bozo, but the rest of these people don't think so. And they like, you're making their day better. So even if you are an idiot bozo, go out there and make their day better, man. Do it.
Absolutely. That's some, that's some beautiful stuff to sort of like think about. Is like, no, even if you have these sort of thoughts in your head about, negative things about yourself, being a content creator or being somebody who puts themselves out there, there's a sense of like direct sort of feedback that we can get that not you don't necessarily get from other things, right? Where like you can directly see the positive impact that you're having on people's lives, and it's like it may not be the biggest network yet, but over time, I think that that's just going to continually grow, and if you just keep putting out that like that cool energy, that positive energy, like it's going to attract that type of community too that comes right back, and it's just a beautiful thing, man.
I have I have one quick question for you then too, because I want to ask you about something and I want to share a quick anecdote.
Hell yeah.
Before so have you had yet somebody come into your stream and just be like wildly negative in a way that's not even like not funny or entertaining? Like has somebody just come in and been rude to you for no reason at all?
I've had comments on YouTube videos like that, but I'm such a new person. Like I just started doing content creation in like January of like 2025. So it's very new. I don't stream that I don't stream a lot. I only stream like the podcast and like leading up to it basically. So
Okay.
no, I think the community of people that's coming in here is like really excited to like hear two people talk about games and like be, reminisce on nostalgia and games and stuff like that. So there's not really too many ways that someone can look at that negatively. I don't know how like
Yeah, fair.
someone can probably prove me wrong if they want to. They can come in here and
Please don't. Please
come
don't. If you're thinking that, don't do it.
but as of now, I think I've been very fortunate that like, I had one guy comment on, when we were wrapping up Local Host podcast being like, oh, why do all of these episodes start off with like 30 minutes of you guys talking about how great it is to be a streamer? And I was like, bro, like that doesn't make any sense. Like the first 30 minutes of these episodes always start with what games we like to play as kids and like reminiscing on like our fun childhood memories. Like you're literally like delusional. But anyway, that was like the worst it's gotten basically so far.
The reason I wanted to ask about this, like I haven't had this experience too often, but I had one experience, and you brought up like the positive energy and like it's this person comes into my stream, and their very first message is, "Wow, this is the most boring stream I've ever been in. I hope I don't pass out and crack my skull on the coffee table." And that's
my
like
God.
loosely paraphrased, but they said basically all of that. They might have changed a couple words to be different words, but and I had this like very quick moment in my head of like I I don't like this comment. How do I handle it? I can just like ban this person and act all frustrated, and then the people who like me will be supportive or whatever. And I was like, or I can flip this on them and have fun at their expense. And so I just started roasting this guy for like the next 15 minutes, right? Just like I wasn't trying to go like super mean with it, but I wanted to let him know, like, you know what, like you don't have power here like you think you do. And I wanted to let other people know that if somebody's going to come at me with a bunch of negativity, I'm not just going to come back at them and like turn the other cheek and give them a hug, but I'm also not going to like have like a rage fit about it and make it a big problem. And so I've like made it my mission. If someone's going to be mean to me, just start roasting them, man. And one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to think it's really funny and they're going to follow too. And if they're ever a dickhead again, we just ban them and that's fine. Or they're just going to leave without a problem because I just embarrassed them in front of people. And either one of those outcomes is honestly perfectly okay with me.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
So there's a third win. I have to say, I think the larger you get, the bigger audience and viewers and numbers and metrics that go up. I think the more people that you're going to have exposed to your stuff, and therefore you're exposed to more kind of negative people. And I think that what I'm trying to say is that the fact that you had that experience means that you're getting enough traction to where, people are seeing your stream, and there's a wider array of different types of people that are interacting with your content, which is good. Like that's a thing that means that you're like growing as a content creator, your audience is growing and stuff like that. And the audience can never all be like these perfect, like fun, happy, positive chatters or funny chatters. You know what I mean? There's always going to be the negative people that come in. So I think that your system
knows?
yeah, I think
maybe that guy's nice most days and he was just having a really bad day, like
and that's the way to look at it, right? I mean, I'm not the type of person to ever like lurk through Twitch and drop into someone's channel and start talking shit about them. That's just not who I am. That's just not
yeah, no, same.
That's just not what I do. But if you've gotten to that point where you're like down bad, I guess, or you're having a bad day and you feel like you need to just take that out on some random stranger on the internet, like that sucks for you, and I hope you feel better, man. Like that's all you can really say, right?
For sure.
Yeah. All right, Shrimps, you rock. This has been a kick-ass podcast episode. Thank you so much again. At this point in time, I'd love for you to just plug yourself. Where can we find you, and what are you playing, and what are you working on?
Yeah, for sure. So twitch.tv/scrimps, just exactly the way it's spelled in the like title of the stream and the title, I presume, of the video. I stream Tuesday through Thursday and Saturday. I also stream other days sometimes, but those are like the scheduled days. I'm guaranteed to be live on those days unless like there's like a big occasion or like a emergency or any something big, either positive or negative, is the only thing that keeps me from being live those days. Other days, sometimes I'm live here and there. And right now we're doing, a lot of PoE 1 stuff. I just got my first build guide up today, actually. And so next week, what we're planning on doing, I want to start a fresh copy of the character with exactly 10 Divines budget. And we're going to see, can we clear some tier 17s, like, and make some content out of that? Because like, in the build guide, I'm showing off a version of this build that has, 50 Divine Gloves and a Mage Blood and like, awakened support gems and all sorts of crazy stuff. And, the more budget you throw at something, you can probably make just about any build look good like that. So I want to prove to people like, this isn't a bait build. I've been playing it since day one, and here's what it looks like. If you play it on day one, it's still good then too. For the rest of this week, my girlfriend's busy for the rest of the week, so I have a lot of time to stream, and I'm just going to be wrapping up. I'm working on a couple of new videos for farms and things like that. And then as like the PoE 1 league sort of dies down, I like to try to play a little bit of kind of variety stuff. Like I know a lot of other people who play PoE only have so much time to play games, and so I really like to try to expose them to other games that I love, and vice versa. Like I've had people like one of my viewers, this was such a cool experience. One of my viewers gifted me Elden Ring and the expansion.
Wow.
And like I had no idea they were going to do this. He was like, hey, like messaged me on Discord, was like, hey, can I get your Steam name? And I was like, sure, I guess, you know, thinking they were just going to like add me as a friend or whatever. And then he comes in a stream. He's like, have you checked your gifts lately? And I was like, no, I didn't know that I should. And I go in there and I've got the full Elden Ring game in DLC. So like I wasn't, you know, I had thought maybe I would play Elden Ring at some point, but I was like, okay, well now we got to do it now. And you know, that was chat exposing me to a really cool game. So like one of the things that's maybe on the docket for that, Hades is on Steam sale, and I played Dead Cells before, but I never played Hades, so I think I'll probably give that a shot. But yeah, I also my YouTube content, I try to mostly focus on. I want to make content on YouTube that's useful for veteran players, but also approachable for new players. And so like just as one quick example, like I put out a map or a video, I put out a video about like, you know, which map layouts in 326 were good, which ones were connected to good things, which ones had good divination cards on them. And at some point I brought up, you know, the Nameless Seer, and I was like, well, I should maybe explain real quick, you know, take 30 seconds, explain what the Nameless Seer is, because maybe there's a new player watching this video and they don't know what that is. And so I try to make content that's like useful for new players and veterans. And I just want to teach more people like how to fish. Like I don't just want to like tell you here's a bullet point of things, do it. I want to teach you like how to get that thought process and how to learn how to do some of these things for yourself too. And if that sounds like something you're interested in, come check it out, man. It'd be cool to see you there.
All right, guys. As always, I will leave links to Scrimps's Twitch, YouTube, all that stuff in the video description. Make sure to go check that out. He's doing some awesome stuff over there. As you can tell, super cool guy, super chill. Make sure to go in there and do not tell him his stream is boring and he's going to break it. Yeah, make sure to tell him when you drop in, his stream is extremely exhilarating and all that fun stuff. So yeah, man, it's been an absolute pleasure, bro. And I hope that we can, you know, have this chat again, maybe in a little while once I get more addicted to PoE 1 and I start watching more of your content and absorbing all of that content.
I mean, hey, maybe next time we talk about me being hooked on PoE too. I had a blast. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great experience, and I will happily come back anytime you want to have me.
Hell yeah, dog. Absolutely. All right, guys, we will catch you in the next one. Peace out. All right, everybody. That wraps it up for this episode of the Passive Tree Podcast. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe for more PoE 2 content. I have a bunch more episodes of the podcast lined up with some really great guests, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you're interested in supporting the podcast and the channel, consider supporting through Patreon. There's a link in the video description. A special shout out to Kevin F. for supporting this channel. I appreciate you. Thank you. And until next time, happy blasting, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.